Oh my god, I got an achievement! I've been getting fucking Pac-Man! So this is a series of portals. It's not portals. Oh. Oh shit! It's him! The Bard's Tale is a 1985 computer RPG and is one of the grandpappies of the dungeon crawler genre. In 2018, the original trilogy received a remaster in the form of the Bard's Tale Trilogy. In addition to making the game compatible with modern hardware, it offers a slew of conveniences for the modern gamer. But I like retro games, and using all of these newfangled additions takes away from the retro experience. There's a reason I typically prefer to emulate originals instead of buying remasters, and it's because I want the original experience, not some bullshit that's probably been updated to be palatable to a wider audience. Luckily, the Bard's Tale Trilogy offers legacy options. Obviously, we're ticking all of these boxes, so what exactly does this mean for us? The first 5 are individual inventory, game-specific songs, use unequipped items, no items in empty houses, and miscellaneous game differences. Collectively, these are mostly quality of life changes to the original games. For our purposes, it means that we have a total of 42 inventory slots, a special party space for monsters, our bard's songs will scale with the dungeon that we're in, and when we're walking around Skara Brae, the only thing we'll find in houses is monsters. No hints to be found. Use unequipped items mostly relates to things like the fire horn on our party's bard, but miscellaneous game differences means that every time we use it, there's a chance that it breaks. These 5 options? Light work. A breeze. Barely even notice them, eventually. They're mostly quality of life, with some slight modernizing to make the game more easily accessible. What kind of retro gaming channel would I be if I was using them anyways? The last 3 are much more impactful in the long run. Full XP requirements. Enable the full XP requirements from the originals, and also some exploits that helped with leveling. Up to twice the XP needed for each level. Allows party attack to be initiated anywhere. Enabled shop buy and sell any charged item. All game events and battles are now redoable. This one is going to become very important later on, and will make our lives so much easier near the end of the game. Save at guild only. With Save at Guild Only enabled, saving the game will only be possible when the party are in an adventurer's guild or camp. Autosave will only fire when entering a guild. Essentially, this means that if I want to save my golden experience, I need to leave the dungeon and get back to the guild. This causes issues on occasion when I get bad rolls fighting dragons or any enemy that can hold or drain my party. And finally, the reason I was interested in trying this game out. Automap disabled. Grab some grid paper and map the levels yourself. This was a big part of the 1980s experience and is why all of the spinners and teleports in dungeons exist. For those that have the time and temperament, this can be a rewarding experience. This is the feature I was most interested in when I started playing this game, and to be completely honest, I feel like it makes the game much more interesting. I'd have to do a second playthrough to verify this, but mapping the dungeons myself was something that I went from being skeptical about to absolutely loving, and I feel without it, I probably wouldn't have appreciated the game nearly as much as I ended up doing. Because I didn't want to just have this written on a journal or something, and I wanted to show my progress, I opted to use Worldographer to create grids, and show them on screen during the streams. This presented an interesting challenge when it came to how I was going to show different traps and events. Alright, so now I've got my party. Brian, my paladin, is the only one with a somewhat normal name. Cheez-Its McDunkle and Junkfuzzle Highlife are my spellcasters, Blargly Scarborough, my bard. I mean, it's the Bard's Tale. How could I not include a bard, right? Joining Brian on the front lines are Fungus Arnold, my hunter, and Dinotits Sullivan, our fighter. Together, these intrepid heroes will save Skara Brae, no matter how much save scumming I have to go through to do it. So, I learned 2 things in advance. The advice I was given said to get all of my characters to level 5 before entering the first dungeon. Not that I know where that is. But I figure I should look for the entrance in the meanwhile, right? Where am I? Where do I go? How do I even begin trying to find out what to do? I go out into the street and I get jumped. I walk into houses and get jumped. I found this old guy who started saying some stuff I didn't understand, and I just kinda left. I still don't really understand what the fuck to do. I beat up on a couple of statues that were in my way because I figured they might be bosses or something, and some of them kick my ass pretty hard, but most are bitch-made. Stumbling between bars, I started asking different bartenders in an attempt to get one of them to say something, and they all kept saying the same thing to me.
The stone golem has been spoken of twofold.
The barkeep smiles. Fuck you for smiling, you cryptic dickbag. I don't know what the fuck I'm supposed to do. Fuck this, I'm going back to the Adventurers Guild because what the fuck is this? Hey, there's a statue down here and another bar. Hey man, how's it going? Wait a second. Wait just a dadgum second. What's this? This place has wine. None of the other bars I've been to have had wine. Brian, you're a big guy. Why don't you go drink some? Wine? Go down to the cellar and pick out a bottle. Is this progress? Is this progress? Oh my god, I got an achievement! A good year, find the wine cellar. What the fuck? Oh my god! What the fuck happened? I've been running around for 3 hours not knowing where the fuck I'm supposed to go. Okay, what the fuck is this? The cellar? This is the first dungeon, right? Why the fuck is it so dark? Oh, I've got to use lanterns. Okay, so I'm also noticing that I can't actually see the stairs behind me. That could pose a problem. And here we are at the very beginning of my journey into this classic CRPG. The cellar, being the first dungeon, does a few things that I initially failed to appreciate. First off, it's walled off. This is not the norm for these dungeons, okay, but it was nice to get a feel for mapping. Second, it lets you know where the beginning of every dungeon is going to be, namely, the bottom left corner. I'm a moron, so I didn't put that together immediately and instead confused myself. We'll cover that later, but just for now, know that I made some mistakes. New features: normal darkness, walls, doors, and the stairs. Also spinners. These are like the building blocks of the dungeons, but I figured that having a running key for the maps that I made would be helpful because they aren't exactly intuitive if you weren't there when I made it. I don't actually have the spinner on this map marked, primarily because they were mainly a minor inconvenience and not a huge roadblock to my success. I usually noticed when I was spun thanks to the magical compass that let me know which direction I was facing. The reason I listed normal darkness here is, well, you can't see in the dungeons without a light source. A lantern, a mage flame, something. This is a stark difference from outside Scarabray, where even at night you can navigate without a fire. Now, you might notice that on this first map, I used a bunch of black blocks for walls, except for areas where the walls were too thin. This is because I didn't know that the walls would primarily be thin. I like my map of the cellar because it demonstrates just how much I ended up learning on this journey. A memory of my humble beginnings. That's enough reminiscing. Let's continue on to the first challenge, the sewers. Now, I spent a long time in the sewers. Multiple streams were spent trying to clear the first level. Part of this is a workflow issue. Not really being comfortable with mapping dungeons yet, but also this. How does it keep getting bigger, dude? I keep, I swear the map that I looked at online did not look this big. I gotta look. Because I did have to look at the map. I didn't have to, but I did look at the map once to see whether I was, insane. Because I feel like my map is so much larger. Because it is! What? Why does this look so different? Why is this so much larger? Wait just a fucking second. Oh my god. I'm noticing something. Dude, I'm fucking noticing. I'm noticing something. Look at this. In the center here. See this? This? and this are at exactly the same y coordinate. And this room is identical to this room. It's not zoomed in, it's looping. Oh my god, bro! I've been getting fucking Pac-Man! That's right. I had no idea how big the dungeon maps were supposed to be. This actually led to me doing just a little bit of research. I didn't look for details, but I scanned some of the later maps to make sure that they are all the same size. For the record, they're all 22 by 22 square grids, with the bottom leftmost corner being 0, 0, and the top rightmost being 21, 21. This is important to understand, because it's how your Scry Sight spell will tell you where things are. It will say, you are Z levels down, Y paces north, and X paces east. I suppose technically it would have been possible to learn this by experimenting in-game, but it didn't occur to me at the time and would still have been very inconvenient. New features here: magical darkness, traps, and secret doors. Magical darkness extinguishes your lanterns, and you cannot illuminate the area with magic. Traps are extremely bad and will probably kill at least one of your party members. Sometimes it's just darts that hurt them, and sometimes party members get poisoned. It's pretty detrimental at this part of the game, to be honest. If you know where they are, though, you can disarm them using a spell. Secret doors are mostly inconsequential. They're visible with all but the most basic forms of dungeon illumination. Anything more powerful than a mage flame or Savar's seal light will reveal them. As such, I just put them down as normal doors on my map. With our second map eventually completed, I started to get much more comfortable with the process. It still wasn't easy, mind you, fighting a bunch of undead, beasts, and other miscreants while trying to put together a map that I'm diligently updating every step of the way is a challenge, but eventually, I started to genuinely enjoy it. By the time I finished Sewers 2, I was pretty much sold on the idea of doing cartography for funsies. I still made sure to return to the Adventurers Guild so that I could keep my experience in gold, but the real progression couldn't be lost to death so easily. Drawing the map gave me the same kind of feeling that roguelites do when you get a permanent bonus to all future runs. Yeah, you might lose a level or maybe an item or two, but I can't lose map progress. Especially when I find a portal in the ground, don't know what it does, and end up lost in Sewers 3 for a while before I was prepared to go. I didn't even want to map it because I still wasn't sure how to handle descending floors. Hint, it's actually extremely simple. You just start the next floor from the exact coordinates you were on the last one. New features: the portal and teleporter. The portal functions as a set of stairs, but you need to be levitating to go up. This was a lesson I learned the hard way and didn't realize because I didn't read the description of the levitate spell. The teleporter is marked with orange as in and blue as out. They're one way, so stepping on one always warrants a scry sight immediately afterwards. I marked them this way as a reference to Portal's Out of the Blue achievement on the orange box. Eventually we conquered Sewers 3, where we found a direct line to the surface right next to Mangar's tower, our only new feature, unique to this dungeon. Unfortunately, we couldn't access the tower, not that we'd be able to handle it at this point anyways. We were missing something. But with all of the sewers mapped, I decided that we can begin our search for the next dungeon. Not knowing where to go or what to do, I decided to get my revenge on that gray dragon statue that wiped my party before. And lo and behold, we killed it in a single turn. Alright. We're just gonna instantly die again, most likely. Ooh, they both lived. Okay, but those two did not. Oh, fuck. I think it has like 10 health. Very brittle. But hey, he's guarding the entrance to a building. A building with warning signs at the entrance. This looks like another dungeon. Sign threatens trespassers with death. Yes? Yo! Enter Harkyn's castle is an achievement. Okay, so this is our next dungeon, I guess. So, for the uninitiated, this is Baron Harkyn's castle, and it is not our next destination. I spent some time here, mapped a little less than half of the first floor, but we're getting killed and olded and drained, and it's getting awfully expensive to make attempts on the castle. I actually don't know if I can afford to keep doing this. 11,000? Oh god, yeah. I actually can't afford to keep mapping Harkyn's castle. It's too expensive. We also encountered a couple of new tiles here, but we're going to talk about those a little bit later on. For now, I decided to give up on this and start looking for the catacombs instead. Because I saw that slightly more people had made it there on Steam, at least according to the game's achievements, logically that means it's earlier in progression, right? So I spent a little time wandering around Skara Brae before I'm not so subtly reminded of a hint that I wrote down in my schizobarkeep.txt file that I decided to use at some point. Magic mouth on the wall speaks. Know this, that a man called Tarjan, thought to many to be insane, had through wizardly powers proclaimed himself a god in Skara Brae 100 years ago. His image is locked in stone until made whole again. This is important because every time I go to heal at the city center, I walked into the wrong temple and had this guy talk to me who wants me to speak the name of a mad god. This isn't the first time that the writing on the wall or a magic mouth has been used to convey useful information, and it's far from the last. But this is the most significant time in the whole game, I think. Speaking the name Tarjan to our friend at the Weird Temple grants us access to the second major dungeon, the Catacombs. The Catacombs primarily house undead enemies, such as skeletons and zombies, and there are several rooms where you'll find massive groups of enemies together. 30, 40, 50 enemies in a single group. The good news is that this is pre-planned. Once you've been into one such room, you'll know whether to avoid it or abuse it later on. Catacombs 1 doesn't have anything else going on, really. I didn't actually start adding the large groups of enemies to my maps until later on, similar to the spinners. Part of this is because I didn't realize that they were actually just fixed encounters that have existed at least since the Black Widows in the sewers, but it was rare that any of these stood out to me. Catacombs 2 has a wall with a rhyme that I still don't understand. 15 doors east and thou art there. On souls they feast in the Dark One's lair. See, this makes sense because the floor is full of doors. Like, seriously, the entrance area coils out into a room completely lined with doors. Unfortunately, you can't go 15 paces east, and if you follow the doors by starting east, you'll be going south, then west pretty quickly. And the 15th door doesn't even lead you to the area with the stairs to the next floor, no matter which direction you go. Still, kinda neat area. This floor is the first one that has a room that's completely inaccessible without either phase door or apparition. A couple of fairly high-level conjurer and magician spells. There's nothing in it, but it messed with me when I first went through that I couldn't 100% the floor yet. There's a mini-boss here, Bashar Kavalor, a master sorcerer, as well as a hint that we'll need later. A voice from nowhere proclaims, "To the tower fly, a mad one die, once lost the eye." Spooky. Ominous, even. This floor is the first one where we encounter an anti-magic field. Technically, our journey saw this first on Harkyn 1 as one of our new tiles, but as we abandoned that floor early, I felt this was a more appropriate place to talk about it. The anti-magic field is a lot like magical darkness, as it'll extinguish your magical fires. But it's actually so much worse. You see, eventually you start casting things like Levitate, Sorcerer's Sight, and Ibarra's mystical coat of armor. These are not insignificant spells that are all turned off by anti-magic fields, necessitating that you recast them, or, if you can't or don't want to, press on without them. The other major new feature that I ended up specially marking was one-way doors, that we ended up referring to as diodes. They do exactly what it seems like. I marked the direction by using a floor that was a shade darker than the floor around it. This was supposed to be like a tile pressed down in my mind. It means I stepped through this way. Finally, Catacombs 3. This is where we encounter our first real boss fight. King Eldrick, who is now a specter, guards this floor, and while he is quite frail, If you don't kill him in one round, or if he gets to attack first, it's going to get really expensive. Killing him nets me a magical eye. I don't know what it's for yet, but I do know that if I look at selling it, it goes for like 10,000 gold. At this point in the game, I started to feel invincible. Yeah, the castle from before was tough, but that was 3 floors ago. I've got more XP, more spells, some better equipment. Surely this helps my situation. It did help, but not enough. It seemed like no matter how many times I attempted to summit the castle, I couldn't make any meaningful progress on mapping it before being turned away. And it was starting to get very expensive. I went from having 500,000 gold to not being able to afford a full heal at the church, and boy was that rough. This was another point where I decided to do some research. You see, I had learned early on that I should get my magician to level 7 before changing his class to another spellcaster and expanding his spell pool. Unfortunately, I took this to mean that he should change class at character level 7, and not once he had level 7 spells. You see, a spellcaster learns a new level of spells every other level. Starting at level 1, they have access to first level spells. Then at level 3, they get second level spells. Level 5, they get third level. All the way until they're level 13 and have 7th level spells. At this point, it's optimal to have them change classes, as they've learned all of the spells they could possibly want from that class. This continues until they have all 4 spellcasting classes maxed out, at which point they can cast any spell in the game. Incredibly useful. Unless, of course, you change classes before you have all the spells. If you do that, then there's no takebacks beyond loading a save. That caster permanently forfeits all future spells in that class. This forever gimped poor Cheez-Its. He would be endlessly mogged by the more learned junk fuzzle for the rest of the playthrough. It's important to note this, because if I'd had access to the ability to full heal my party, I don't think I would have had this much trouble at this point in the game. He paid the price for me to learn how to play properly. The point of all this is that my party needed gold. Lots of gold, if we wanted to make any progress on the tower. Remember how I said we could avoid or abuse those large encounters from before? It's time to abuse them. I spent some time grinding against the undead for the first level of the catacombs, summoning an illusory dragon to help me destroy large groups of enemies. I figure this is probably the best place to talk about how combat works. In your party, positions 1, 2, and 3 are the frontliners. They are the ones who the enemy can actively choose to attack and will take the brunt of your party's damage. Positions 4, 5, and 6 are your backline, who are either providing support or attacking from afar. If you recall from the beginning, we also get a special monsters only slot. You can choose what each party member does in order from 1 to 6, and the monster will move on its own. In smaller fights against 1 or 2 creatures, this typically meant I was spamming attack, 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 defend, 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 so that I could save my backliner spellcasting and songs for larger, more dangerous fights. Phew, alright, that's simple enough. But what about the enemies? Enemies are also in groups. The difference is that there can be many enemies in a single slot. Now, normally when using melee attacks, you can only attack one enemy at a time. This is why spellcasters are so important, because they get access to the ability to damage entire groups. Magicians and conjurers casting spells like Shock Sphere to damage 6, 10 dudes at once really is what makes it possible to win these fights. Even though higher level frontliners can take on hordes of enemies, it'd take a long time. So anyways, killing 80 enemies in a single fight awards you with 80 enemies worth of experience and gold. This is very convenient for what is hopefully obvious reasons now. This is how we get our gold, and we'll be doing this again near the end of the game. We end up killing a lot of the undead and making our way back to the castle a few times. As it turns out, farming gold also farms levels, which is also helpful in our desires to avoid taking damage and status conditions. Now that we're not being bodied by every other enemy in the castle, we can finally make some progress. We've even discovered a couple of new tiles. One's just a spa that restores your spellcaster's spell points. These are pretty rare and very convenient. The other new tile is hot coals, and you can probably guess what they do. A small amount of damage for each tick as long as you're standing on them. Not the worst thing ever, but definitely very stressful when you get teleported there and don't know what's going on. Another thing that I learned here is what a critical is. You see, in most games these days, a critical is a multiplier to your damage. A hit that would do 3 can critically strike into 6, sometimes 9. Not so in Bard's Tale. This tile has a guard captain, who can critically strike you, and his rate for doing so seems ridiculously high. And in this game, a critical hit is an instant kill. No matter the HP, no matter the difficulty of the fight otherwise, a critical hit is an instant KO. This is why Fungus gets to stay on the front line. Wow, and now we're even getting comfortable with how Apparate and Phase Door work, and oh boy, Harkyn 2. Harkyn 2 is a cursed area. Like, actually cursed. We've run into the issue of not being able to apparate into places before, specifically in Catacombs 3 to get into the Spectre boss's arena, but that was because all of the rooms were protected by anti-magic. Harkyn 2 has disallowed the use of apparition and phase door at all. This isn't a huge problem, but it does create an extra layer of stress when you're trying to find the exit to this labyrinth, especially since we've started getting comfortable with using our fast travel spells to expedite our movement. Knowing that we can't do that here means we always need to be aware of our exit route. This was another map that had an area you cannot actually go to. 2 of them, in fact. This stressed me out because, at first, you can pretty easily see into one of the rooms that you can't map. The most important thing here, however, is the silver square. This is another item that's important later. Unlike the eye, however, it doesn't seem very valuable. Getting to it requires passing through an anti-magic field and then finding your way through a couple of teleporters, which isn't too bad when you know they're there. Eventually, I came to this room, and I was a little bit confused, but basically there are a bunch of illusory walls that you can simply walk through. The room looks like this, but it's actually empty. Oh, that's another portal. No, it's not? Oh. Something about the way that room, like, loaded in made me think I had been teleported. Oh, no. Something's not quite right here. This is a series of portals. Okay. So this is a series of portals. It's not portals. There is some other fuckery afoot here. We're gonna go forward this way. And to our right, a door is going to appear. I think we can actually just say this entire room is like this. It appears to have walls, but they don't actually exist. And they disappear as soon as you get close to them. Let's do it like this. I think this one's actually fine. Because if we do it like that, then then we know that there's some fuckery with it. Harkyn 3. This is another very important place, but not quite yet. There's a tile where there are 4 groups of 99 enemies. By this point, we've long since acquired the ability to hit all of our enemies using Mangar's Mind Blade, by far the strongest multi-target spell in my spellcaster's arsenals. We also pick up a crystal sword, the best melee weapon I could find at this point. I made a point of returning here a few times to trick out my frontliners as much as I could. Most importantly, however, this is where we run into another boss. You activate the statue of the Mad God by using the eye that you got from the Spectre in the Catacombs. While this 15-foot tall statue of a warrior isn't too hard to beat, it does hit you extremely hard when you don't finish it in a single round. Defeat it, and we're on our way to Kylerian's Tower. This is where the game really kicks into high gear. The game has thrown pretty much every trick it has at you by now, and this is a very fitting test of your abilities. It's also very effective at keeping you, the player, very humble. Kylerian's Amber Tower is only a single floor, but it is the most frustrating, difficult, and painful floor in the whole game. This is due, in part, to being designed by a sadist, but primarily, it's because should you decide that you need to escape, leave, and come back, you're forced to trek through 2 other dungeons in order to return. You see, when we used the eye to activate the statue, it disappeared from our inventory. This wouldn't be too bad, you see, except that we're getting our asses kicked in here. necessitating breaks in our dungeon delving. So every time we leave, that's another trip to Catacombs 3, then to Harkyn's 3, then back to the tower. I spent a very long time here. I accidentally found my way to the Silver Triangle, another very important item, and for a while had mistakenly assumed that this room covered in darkness was empty. I found out after some research that the crystal swords I had picked up were actually very important for killing a crystal golem here, and I never even noticed. I just kind of assumed that my weapon was extremely strong. Eventually, we make our way to the final room, and Kylerian himself greets us. Now, I had assumed he was a cohort or ally of Mangar, but apparently this dungeon existed as a test to make sure we were ready to take on Mangar. Right. A test that killed me more times than most of the other dungeons put together. With Kyle's blessing, we take the Onyx Key and now have the ability to take on Mangar's tower. I attempted to summit Mangar's tower in a single stream. I knew it was 5 floors going into it, and I was prepared for a marathon. Long story short, I failed. It took me more than 20 hours to finish the game's final stretch, a not insignificant amount of which was spent killing barbarians in droves. You see, I'd run into the same problem as when I first got to Harkyn's castle. I was getting checked at every opportunity by basilisks, dragons, evil eyes, and even Fred. It wasn't any one of these enemies that spelled my doom. It was the fact that I needed to trek through 5 floors of them, seeking the exit to each one, and making sure I left no stone unturned in my quest to defeat Mangar. At this point, death wasn't even a problem. My spellcasters had the ability to revive the dead and even restore the party to full health. Now, our money would be drained by level drains, old and stone status conditions. You see, old and level drains make your party members' stats drop by an insane amount. This makes monster encounters more frequent if they're at the front of your party, and is a stacking issue with each encounter. Stone is by far the most dangerous condition, as none of the spells the party cast cures it. The solution, of course, is to farm again, which is boring. It did make a sick beat, though. Mangar's Tower 1 has 3 fairly large rooms that are nearly identical to each other to try and confuse you. And it worked. I did get a little confused and had to look up what I was missing, and it turned out to be one of these teleporters. After that, I wouldn't say it was smooth sailing, but it wasn't too terribly difficult to find my way to the magic mouth that sends me up to the next floor. Mangar's Tower 2 has 2 important things. The first is a hint saying, "On the wall is etched, the spectre snare can catch a foe and bind him lest his spirit go." We'll talk about this again on floor 5. The other important thing is a magic mouth that says, "Two shapes yours, one's around. Speak the shape, and final found." This is referring to the silver shapes that you found before. A square, a triangle, and, now the last one, a circle. These will also be relevant again later. Find the stairs, and go up to the 3rd floor. Mangar's 3 and all subsequent floors are cursed. That means no apparition and no phase doors. This floor is absolutely covered in darkness and is full of one-way doors. On this floor, your objective is to assemble a message from Mangar using the etchings on the wall in various locations. That's all well and good, but remember, every time we've had to leave this god's-forsaken tower, we're forced to make our way back through the sewers, unless you find the Keymaster.
Are you the Keymaster?
Not that I know of.
For 50 grand, he'll give you a key to the gate, granting easy access to the tower and saving so much time on future endeavors. This was an extremely difficult floor to map just because of the sheer amount of magical darkness there is to contend with. Touching every single wall to see if it's there or if you've come across a hallway is so very time consuming. Eventually, you speak the secret passphrase and then can find the stairs to ascend to the 4th floor. Mangar's 4 is an extremely strange floor to me. The gimmick is essentially that upon touching a certain tile, every wall in the dungeon becomes a door, and vice versa. This presented an extremely difficult mapping challenge for me, and made me question how best to go about it. I settled for drawing all doors that I found after that point as walls, and any walls that I found as doors. Eventually, we find our way to the final floor. Mangar's Tower, Floor 5. This is the endgame. This is the final boss. It's all led up to this. First room just has a teleporter that leads you to a magic mouth and a fork. Both forks require you to pass through an anti-magic field. One's an empty room with a few traps, the other leads to a room full of darkness. Getting through this room eventually leads you to the main room, except as soon as you step into it, you get teleported into a labyrinth with teleporters and traps. Getting through this actually lets you into the main room. This room has many smaller rooms and traps. The only way forward is to dive into a pool of boiling blood. This teleports us to the end of a hallway. Here, we can only go north or south. South will lead us through a pair of one-way doors that take us back to the main room. North leads us into a room with a few doors. The sides lead back to the tile that we started. Going straight requires us to walk through fire. At the end of the hallway is a door that asks us to use the 3 shapes we picked up. If, by some chance, you made it all this way without having them, then I pity you. This room is completely covered in magical darkness. The door and 2 other tiles are trapped. You can see here I fucked up by putting one of them in the wrong spot. All of these tiles have anti-magic. Entering this room from behind is optimal because these tiles all actually have anti-magic on them. Not that I ever checked, apparently. This tile right here asks you to remember something that I asked you to recall way back on floor 2. Do you remember what it was? That's right, the Spectre Snarer. Now, I didn't get this, but it's the strongest weapon I was able to find in this playthrough. From here, we head south and face the man himself. Oh shit! It's him! The fight with Mangar is far from an easy ordeal. The man is incredibly powerful, and is the only boss I didn't manage to beat on my first try. This is due in part to the fact that he caught me by surprise. But even knowing exactly when and where I would be encountering him didn't make my life any easier. Mangar, being a wizard, is capable of casting Greater Summoning, which will summon greater demons or demon lords to fight alongside him. On top of this, he starts the fight flanked by 2 demon lords. Demon lords are capable of damaging the entire party, or stoning your frontliners instantly. Greater demons, should they be summoned, are able to possess party members and make them hostile. Mangar himself is also capable of critically hitting your party members if he decides to throw down in melee. Upon winning the fight, Kylerian teleports into the room, congratulates us on our victory, and awards us with a massive amount of golden experience. Kylerian, the good archmage, appears before you in a flash of light. "Well done!" he cries, beaming. "Your quest in Skara Brae is fulfilled. The evil one is now defeated, and his spell of winter will soon end. You will all, as a symbol of my gratitude, receive 300,000 experience bonus. Also, take this 300,000 gold to share amongst yourselves. Farewell, and live long." Kylerian vanishes. Thus, Skara Brae is saved, and the heroes go down in history as legends. This marks the end of a 9-month journey for me. And what a journey it was. The Bard's Tale is one hell of an experience, and I would wholeheartedly recommend others also play this game. I also recommend turning off the auto mapper. At first I was skeptical on whether this would be worth it, but I would be lying if I said that I didn't end up enjoying the process of mapping out each dungeon. It was a long, difficult journey, but damn was it great. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing about my journey through this now nearly 40-year-old game. Let me know if you'd like to hear some more tales from my retro gaming experiences.